This is Akashwani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India-Australia relations. The participants are Gitesh Sharma, former Indian High Commissioner to Australia, and Nishit Kumar, anchor.
India and Australia have several commonalities which serve as a foundation for closer cooperation and multifaceted interaction. Both are strong, vibrant, secular and multicultural democracies. They both have a free press and an independent judicial system. To discuss the relations between India and Australia today, we are privileged to have with us former Indian High Commissioner to Australia, Gitesh Sharma. Gitesh sir, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
So now, given this background, how do you see the relations between the nations growing in the current times and the times to come?
I think it's a remarkable story. In the last 20-25 years, certainly India's relations with several countries in the world, including the Western world, including United States, they have been transformed. But if there's a new story and a very, very happy story, which we never perhaps imagined, that is Australia and the Pacific. It's a completely transformed scenario. And India and Australia, we knew each other through the Commonwealth framework, but there were important differences. Australia's experience of the colonial rule was very different from that of India. Australia identified itself more with Europe, perhaps with the English-speaking world more than with Asia. But in the last, say, 20 years, it has changed a lot. See, while Australia continues to be close consultation with these countries on foreign policy, the trade and economic relations have moved towards Asia. You'll find that China is their largest economic partner. Japan is also one of the largest partners. The society has changed in Australia. It is no longer what we earlier understood as white Australia. The fastest growing immigrant community there is perhaps India, apart from England, and Chinese also. So it's a more Asian version of Australia. So I think the changes which took place in Australia, they were very significant. And India's own economic reforms since the 90s, that started picking up steam. And today we are an economy to be reckoned with. So perhaps in Australia, we didn't look at India with that much interest. Even Australia couldn't ignore the COVID period, the disruption of supply chain, the other kinds of issues, the political bonds that were built. So everything sort of came together, and today we are sort of natural partners, India and Australia.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, India, both the nations, India and Australia, are two very important partners especially in the Indo-Pacific, and cooperate closely in a wide range of sectors. Now, what could be the areas where this cooperation has the potential actually to be augmented further?
As you said that, in the Indo-Pacific region, there are countries which are sort of common-minded when it comes to believing in rules-based kind of respect for free trade, respect for territorial integrity. So it is very important that such countries come together and present themselves together, common platform. So when India and Australia, along with Japan and United States, they work towards Quad, they present a kind of very positive model of the Indo-Pacific, which is open for all and it is not closed for anyone. So I think that has been a very big transformation. But having said that, there are the other aspects that once you have the political understanding to build the nitty-gritty of that relationship, there is a strong economic dimension. Australia particularly is a country which, while its foreign policy is certainly coordinated with Western countries, big way, but they look for trade opportunity and economic opportunities. And we also, in a country which is growing from 7 to 8 and will go further, fastest growing major economy, it's not just as an export economy, but we need coal, we need rare earths, we need all kinds of metals, we need resources, we need supplies from elsewhere to fuel our growth. So I think Australia and India have synergies, which as we get to know each other better, so we can work together towards each other's benefit and towards the common good.
You mentioned about the trade and commerce, but before that, I'd like to come back to very important points you mentioned, China and Quad. Now, talking from the strategic point, what could be the course of action for both the countries to further strengthen the ties against, especially the backdrop of China's continued efforts to step up aggression in the Indo-Pacific, and how has actually Quad been the lighthouse in turbulent waters of geopolitics?
I don't think that Quad does present itself in such a way that China is formally seen as a kind of enemy, if I may use that word. The Quad has its own kind of countries which are like-minded countries which are pursuing a like-minded objective. I think within Quad also, while these countries are acutely aware that China's rise, that is something to contend with, but we are not part of any anti-China grouping as far as India is concerned. And those who say Quad is a Asian NATO or should be a NATO, I think we're going in another direction. There is another important difference, that like the other three Quad countries, India is a Quad country with a land border of China. We have a long history of managing our relations with China. In fact, we have a robust economic relations with China while we are pursuing for peace in other ways. So therefore, it is not only about maritime aspects as far as India is concerned. I think Quad is a whole ecosystem in which, for instance, resilient supply chains that is to be kind of strengthened. The Pacific Islands are there, which have their own concerns. There are, the disaster-related issues. These are areas where commonly tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, tsunamis. So the entire ecosystem where countries which are well-meaning, India, China, Australia, Japan, and some other friendly countries also, and ASEAN countries. So we can work together for the common good. So that I think I would say, and the China aspect, yes, but we have our complex relationship. Each one of us has a complex relationship, and India certainly has very, very complex.
Talking of defense cooperation, how do you see the 2+2 dialogue, that is one, the Multi-Logistics Support Agreement, that is MLSA, and the Malabar exercise, etc., build up and fortify the ties?
Going in the right direction, and we must be realistic because as far as defense ties are concerned, many of our equipments, platforms, they were different origin, and the Australian defense was heavily dependent on American, British, and other such supplies, whereas India had to turn towards Russia and some other countries, friendly countries. So I think one was the challenge of common platform and the experience also of using such equipment and platforms. But having said that, I think the other aspect was, I think Australia had a delicate task as it set for itself, that while its trade relations with China was very, very robust, the number one trading partner, its foreign policy and defense was closer with the West and other countries. To manage and balance a relationship like that, which is in a way contradictory, you have close ties with. They had somewhere, one has to be reasonable in expectation. They came into Malabar exercise and then they withdrew and again came back. So now our current experience of being together in our military, our forces, as you say, logistics support and all, these are going a long way in building up common traditions, common ways of working together, being together in difficult situations, patrolling the seas, using equipment in tandem and harmony. So we do our own forces, they participate in military exercises jointly with Australia and with other countries. So as we go along, yes, certainly in difficult times, we can work more smoothly and more easily together. Hopefully, one is always right to be more ambitious, that when we have our own make in India kind of ambitions, defense equipment, and we become more indigenous. And Australia is just in a smaller kind of defense society, and they're looking for joint projects or being part of it and benefiting with India. I'm sure they will see over time, as confidence builds, they will find more opportunities. Will working together in Make India projects as well. If you remember that iconic picture of Australian Prime Minister Tony Albanese doing visit on the first indigenous aircraft carrier in India, that goes a long way in saying, and these images convey a lot.
True. So, talking of trade and commerce, of course, these kind of define much of the contours of any relationship, especially if it's a bilateral relationship. Now, trade ties between the two countries have reached around 24 billion US dollars in 2023 and 24, which is actually very humongous. Now, how do you see this growing?
We should be again very realistic in understanding trade. Sometimes we tend to understand that how much we have exported and how little we have imported. But an economy, India's magnitude, we're already one of the largest in the world and moving towards the third slot. And if you're growing like that, you need to fuel that economy with resources, whether it's coal or energy or gas or rare earths. And where do you get them from? Australia, in a sense, is not far away. I mean, if you look at Perth and Western Australia, that is in a way more looking towards India than anywhere else. So I think there are synergies in working together. And Australia is very driven by trade, whereas foreign policy is important. But their society very dependent on agriculture and digging and exporting. They'll dig coal, they'll dig iron ore and export. And some of the things in India's case, we have our own programs to develop our coal mining to new levels. So naturally, we will have to find a way of accommodating Australia. But they have high quality coal, for instance, which might make our coal plant very efficient. So I think as we go along, things there will be greater opportunities. So this ECTA, which came into Economic and Cooperation Trade Agreement, which came into a limited one in 22, that is a kind of taste of things to come. I think you said that 20 odd billion that probably will reach 45 to 50 billion in 2035 or so. The sky is limit, and as long as India is growing at this rate, we will have plenty of scope to work with Australia.
You just mentioned about ECTA. Now, both the sides just recently had the first joint committee meeting, that is JCM, under the India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, that ECTA, and discussed its smooth implementation. Free trade agreements, of course, they are in place. Now, certainly it's going to give the economic ties an upward trajectory. Your views on this?
It's only the first step. And even then, when it was conceived of, it was thought as the first step towards a more comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. It was not meant to be complete in itself. So in the interim. Now, as far as the bit of background to this, that Australia was very disappointed, with this RCEP. India didn't join the multilateral partnership agreement, in which brought together the world's largest such trade agreement. But the great thing about the understanding at the highest level is that Australia also realized that they have to respect India, and India would take the right decisions based on its own national interest. And whatever doors could be kept open, Australians kept it open. And we also perhaps found it simpler and better to have bilateral understandings. Sometimes these regional agreements, while they tend to look free, but there are non-tariff barriers, for instance, or there are other kinds of what we might say malpractices that trade from moving in certain ways that don't really help the situation. So we won't elaborate here. But the bilateral trade arrangements, they tend to make up for these kinds of deficiencies. So the thing was, India and Australia didn't sit idle once India had stepped aside from our RCEP process. So we decided that let's do the first step, let's do ECTA. Once that's out of the way, let's sit and talk of a more comprehensive agreement also, and that will be the basis for our comprehensive strategic partnership. When countries like India and Australia work together, it gives us the confidence to deal with other countries as well, that how mutually beneficial partnerships and genuine trade relationships, which are two-way, can be set up. We have huge expectations.
So with these recent initiatives, one is actually reminded of the former Australian Foreign Minister Stephen Smith, who once famously said that Perth and Chennai are closer to each other than Sydney is to Seoul, to Shanghai, or even to Tokyo for that matter. Thanks so very much, sir, for having joined in and enlightened our listeners with your views. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to engage with you. Thank you so much.
You were listening to a discussion on India-Australia relations. The participants were Gitesh Sharma, former Indian High Commissioner to Australia, and Nishit Kumar, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.